following is a CUNY TV special presentation.
Over the weekend, we lost a major person of our city, a gentleman who loved New York, dedicated himself to making sure that all of us would talk the truth, and he was a reporter's reporter. That was Gabe Pressman. He was the first local TV reporter in New York City. He walked these streets day in and day out, reporting the news. And he was a true journalist and someone who I think everyone in this room respected. He passed away at 93 and literally worked up until the last few weeks of his life, showing his passion and dedication to his profession and the city he wrote and worked for. Let's take a moment of silence for Gabe Pressman. And now we are honored to welcome back New York State Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. The last time he spoke to us, he was just a few weeks into his first year as the 65th Attorney General of New York State. Since then, Eric has made tremendous impact in his work to defend the rights of New Yorkers, creating a safer and more just city and state. His initiatives such as Smart Seniors, Help for Homeowners, have improved the lives of New Yorkers. Programs like iStop have established New York as a leading leader in combating the rising devastation of addiction by mandating physicians to consult a database of patient drug history before treatment. Over the past few months, the Attorney General has taken actions against new policies from the federal government that have and will dramatically change policies ranges from the environment to our safety to our status as a sanctuary city. Mr. Attorney General, we look forward to hearing your vision of New York. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome New York Attorney General Eric Schneiderman.
Move around. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for joining me, Bill. Thank you not just for your introduction, but for your remarkable, extraordinary commitment that continues to make ABNY one of the most vital institutions in what is, to me, the most vital and exciting and important city in the world. So thank you very much for your commitment. It's a pleasure to be here with so many old friends, colleagues, current colleagues, like our great Police Commissioner Jim O'Neill, people who I've worked with on many of the projects I'll talk about, Hector Figueroa, my law school classmate, Marisa Lago. And it's also always good to be here with a few former adversaries and even one or two current adversaries. I welcome you and look forward to engaging. I do find that over the period of time I've been Attorney General, there is nothing more rewarding than maintaining a line of communication with someone you disagree with. And we learn a lot and you can accomplish a lot. And in the politics of today, reaching across divides of people you disagree with is more precious than ever, in my view. So I'm proud to be your lawyer. I'm grateful for the opportunity that gives me to represent not just New York's people, New York's institutions, but also to represent New York's values, which I want to speak about a little bit. And it seems like a very short time ago when I became Attorney General, but somehow or other I have risen up to become something of a dean of the delegation of Democratic Attorneys General that I want to focus on, because over the last six months, that coalition has emerged as a much more potent force nationally than it ever has in history, and this really is something that's worth taking into account. When I became Attorney General more than 6 years ago, I set out 3 essential goals for the office. First, to build the best public law firm in the United States. Second, to always be guided by the essential American principle of equal justice under law. And third, for our office to do whatever we can to ensure that New York is as competitive as it can be in the global economy. And after 6 years in office, I am proud to say that we've made great progress on all three of these goals. Before I became Attorney General, a lot of people don't realize this, I spent most of my career in private practice. I was a defense lawyer at a big law firm, represented a whole wide variety of corporate defendants, and I've always believed that the people of the state of New York deserve the same quality of legal work that my corporate clients demanded when I was at my law firm. So I brought that demanding quality to my work as Attorney General, and today I do believe we've had the best public law firm in the country. We get resumes every day from people who, when I read them, I think, I should be working for this person. This person's way overqualified to be supervised by me. But we've used this influx of talent to create new bureaus, reorganized others. We've made major strides in upgrading our technology. Over the last 6 years, we brought more money back to the state than ever before in history, and I'm particularly proud of this. We have developed some of the country's most innovative programs for dealing with law enforcement's most intractable problems. 2 examples. We set up the nation's best prescription drug tracking system to give doctors and pharmacists the tools they need to prevent doctor shopping for opioids. According to the State Health Department, during the first year our iStop system was, for tracking prescriptions was in use, doctor shopping, getting prescriptions from the same doctor, for 2 doctors for the same drug, dropped 75%. Second, uniquely among the states, we closed the gun show loophole in New York. And to make that happen, speaking of reaching across divides, I had to reach out to New York's gun show operators. And let's just say that having served as the national co-chair of legislators against illegal guns, we didn't have the warmest relationship at the outset to build on. But I made the extra effort. I went out to visit them and at gun clubs and gun shows. We were able to work together, seeing past our differences, and together we created what is really a national model, a set of model AG procedures that ensure that no one who buys a gun at a New York gun show can get out without a background check. And we got the buy-in of the gun show operators and dealers, and that's what makes it work. So I love my work, but I especially like the opportunity it gives me to try things like this that no one has ever tried before. And my office will continue to be the source of new approaches and innovation as long as I'm your Attorney General. In the course of this, it became clear to me that we had to develop very strong relationships with leaders in every sector of the economy. Consistent with my goal of keeping New York competitive, we've shifted the culture of our office by making it clear that lawyers on my team don't get credit just for catching bad guys. You also get credit for helping good guys. And in every sector of the economy, from retail to healthcare to construction, our best sources of information about bad actors usually come from the good guys, from legitimate businesses who play by the rules, and from unions who want to report activities, even if it's activities that hurt people who aren't their membership. So the relationships we've developed with leaders of the business community, nonprofits, labor, and others have been crucial to our efforts to defend New York and stand up for New York values in the face of some very dangerous and damaging policy initiatives that are coming out of Washington over the last 6 months. And I really want to focus on that because, first of all, it's been a transformational experience for the work of my office and for the work of this coalition of attorneys general that I'm a part of now. And ladies and gentlemen, it has been a wild 6 months. Our first major test came on January 27th, a week after the inauguration, when the president handed down his first unconstitutional anti-Muslim travel ban. The ban offended many of us, particularly lawyers and people who believe in the rule of law and in our constitutional framework that imposes limits on even what a president can do. The first ban, you may recall, was surrounded by a lot of chaos, generally recognized to have been badly drafted, rolled out with no clear instructions to anyone. There was an article about it written at Brookings that sort of captured the zeitgeist of the moment called Malevolence Tempered by Incompetence, and that really, to me, captured a lot of the the atmosphere of those early days. But at a deeper level, I felt that the travel ban was an affront to the values I take special pride in as a New Yorker. And I want to mention this because I do believe in the exceptionalism of New York, and I think that our tradition is more important than ever, and New York values are more important than ever. And when I speak of New York values, I mean the values of openness, pluralism, innovation, and common sense that have distinguished New York throughout its history. Going back to its days as New Amsterdam, New York, unlike many other colonies, was not started by a specific religious group seeking to create a relatively homogeneous community like the Puritans in Massachusetts, Quakers in Pennsylvania, Catholics in Maryland. When we were still New Amsterdam, we were just a trading port. Our biggest aspiration was to be a major center of trade and commerce, and more than any other colony, this port was always open to all. Famously, in 1654, the first boats filled with Jews fleeing oppression from the South American colonies in Portuguese and Spanish territory appeared off the coast of New Amsterdam. Governor Peter Stuyvesant wrote back to his bosses at the Dutch West India Company and essentially saying, I don't have to take them, do I, really? And his bosses in Amsterdam wrote back and said, yes, actually you do. We take everyone. We don't discriminate based on religion, a remarkable statement for that period of history. And for centuries since, there has been a sense of pluralism and openness to new people and new ideas that has characterized New York as it has grown into the greatest city in the world. Well, starting in January with my colleagues, who up until that time, the Coalition of State Attorneys General was a pretty informal group that worked together sometimes on cases, but we didn't really have much in the way of systems or a tradition of working together in a very well-coordinated fashion. The President's January 27th travel ban could not have been more of an affront to the New York values I just spoke of and to our tradition. It sought to shut down the entire U.S. refugee program at a time when tens of thousands of refugees desperately sought shelter from war and oppression, and it sought to block all immigration from 7 overwhelmingly Muslim countries with no coherent rationale other than anti-Muslim animus. So the travel ban offended our values, but it was more than an affront to New York values. It was also a direct assault on the business and civic institutions that are New York's livelihood. If the ban was not challenged, our city's economy, which depends on free commerce and immigration, our businesses that are constantly seeking to attract and retain the best and brightest, would have been cut off from entire sections of the world. So on the afternoon of January 27th, I got on the phone with my counterparts, other state attorneys general all across the nation. We agreed that we were not going to get any realistic assessment of what this was all about from anyone in the federal government, and that as the state's top law enforcement officers, it was our job to do so. So within 36 hours, we assembled 17 attorneys general representing more than 130 million people to come out strongly against the ban, to stand up for the rule of law, and for the essential constitutional principle that even a president cannot discriminate based on religion or national origin. We issued a statement making it clear that we would challenge it in courts all across the country, and we did. This was a unique experience for the state attorneys general. And as we prepared our cases, I reached out to leaders in the finance, labor, healthcare, and tech communities and got the facts and figures we needed to make the case that the travel ban would have a devastating effect on New York's economy. This was tremendously important for getting us into court. We were able to argue it wouldn't just hurt immigrants and refugees, it would hurt us all. Major New York institutions, many represented here today, joined us and supported our fight in the courts. SUNY and CUNY, Greater New York Hospital Association, tech companies came forward very enthusiastically, like Kickstarter, Etsy, and Meetup. Major leaders in finance added their voices to the effort. And then with these powerful alliances, which we assembled in New York and in other states, we went into courts all across the country to challenge this travel ban. We were joined by lawyers for immigrants' rights groups, civil rights groups, and individual detainees, and we soon figured out that our best chance for a national injunction was in court in Washington State, so we threw our support behind the efforts of the Washington AG and got a broad order blocking the travel ban that was upheld on appeal by the Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit. We achieved similar success when we challenged the second version of the travel ban. And with yesterday's ruling by the U.S. Supreme Court, it is clear we'll be taking the fight one more step up the appellate ladder this year. Now, let me say something about yesterday's Supreme Court ruling relating to the business alliances and the support we got from the business community for our efforts. The business community in particular can take heart from the structure of the Supreme Court's partial stay of the lower court injunction. In modifying the injunction, the court prevented the government from banning travel to the U.S. by anyone with a legitimate employment-related reason to travel here. Legitimate academic, nonprofit, and family connections were also protected by the Supreme Court. It is too early to predict what the court's ultimate ruling will be, but the arguments about the potential for injury to businesses, nonprofits, and educational institutions in New York and other states seem to have had an impact. And that was due to our collective work, and I think that's going to be a part of whatever decision comes out of the Supreme Court. So as I said, ladies and gentlemen, the fight over the travel ban was a galvanizing moment for our coalition of state attorneys general who formed the core of the legal resistance in that effort. And we're now working more closely together and with more clarity of purpose than at any time in our history. State attorneys general have a new role to play in the new turbulent American world of politics and policy, and believe me, I believe my colleagues and I are up to the occasion. I found myself in a position to provide some leadership to the counterparts, in part because I've been around now for 6 years, longer than a lot of other AGs, and we've built such an outstanding public law firm benefiting from people who thought they would be working in the federal government and aren't, and now working with us, in part because of my unique set of experiences, having litigated both with the Obama administration and with Donald Trump himself. Finally, thanks to you, because I've had a very strong sense throughout these struggles that I really do have the people of New York and the key institutions of New York at my back in these efforts. So as we kept building our coalition and expanding the efforts to defend the rule of law, we moved on to other potentially devastating federal initiatives. I now lead a group of 25 state and local governments that have successfully intervened to defend the Clean Power Plan and other critical programs to address the existential threat of climate change. And after the President decided to pull out of the Paris Climate Accord, my office, along with a large group of other AGs, signed on to the We Are Still In pledge. We joined an amazing group of government actors, businesses, nonprofits, labor and investors, including ABNY members like eBay, Bloomberg, and NYU, that have committed to continuing to take action on climate change. Like you, I know that it is tremendously short-sighted for the United States to abandon a leadership role in the transition to a new energy economy, and any delays in our efforts to slow the devastating effects of climate change put us all at risk. We know that the water in New York Harbor is more than a foot higher than it was in the early 20th century, and any New Yorker that lived through Superstorm Sandy knows that climate change is real, it is here, and it is deadly. That's why if the federal government won't defend our planet, which we anticipated, my colleagues and I have intervened to ensure that we can defend our planet and defend these important policies. The same dynamic is now at play in the fight over the future of health care for millions of New Yorkers and really all Americans, where the energized coalition of state attorneys general and our allies are once again set to play a critical role. As you know, right now, the U.S. Senate is considering a bill that would take health care away from tens of millions of the most vulnerable Americans, including millions of New Yorkers. Yesterday's report from the Congressional Budget Office indicated that 22 million fewer Americans would have health care by 2026 under this proposed legislation. Until some bill is passed and signed into law, keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, the Affordable Care Act is still the law of the land. There are still people receiving health insurance under the Affordable Care Act. It is under attack in litigation, so we're proceeding both to defend the Affordable Care Act, because I think it may be harder for them to replace it and repeal it than they think, and at the same time opposing these poorly conceived changes that would undo the provisions of the Affordable Care Act. The Senate bill would scrap many of the hard-fought protections for the sick, poor, and elderly that have finally brought some modicum of justice to our healthcare system. And it would have a particularly devastating effect on New York, where our healthcare sector is one of the pillars of our economy and where some estimates indicate that New York could lose nearly $7 billion in healthcare funding. This is tremendously important, and it's important for everyone in New York to understand the degree to which this would hurt New York worse than other states, and that in fact targets New York in a way that it does not target other states. So, once again, I'm leading a large group of attorneys general that have moved to intervene in litigation to protect the Affordable Care Act's cost-sharing subsidies, the same subsidies that make coverage economically feasible for insurance plans and that make coverage affordable for low-income New Yorkers. This litigation is ongoing in the District of Columbia because we believe the federal government will no longer defend the plan. We are prepared to do so. In New York, 730,000 people now rely on more than $900 million in cost-sharing reduction payments provided annually pursuant to the Affordable Care Act, and I am committed to defending them. Let me add that, as written, the Senate's health care bill would also defund Planned Parenthood, in my view, placing an undue burden on women's constitutional rights, something that I think we will be prepared to challenge in court. It also includes a provision that specifically targets New York and only New York's system for funding Medicaid that would require massive state tax increases to offset billions of dollars of lost revenue. If the version of the health care bill proposed last week ever becomes law, I am committed to go to court to challenge it and to protect New Yorkers from these wrong-headed and unconstitutional provisions. I would like to thank the people from Greater New York Hospitals for that round of applause. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is important to realize, speaking of Greater New York Hospitals, the story of the Affordable Care Act in New York is a success story. We've built one of the best, if not the best, healthcare exchanges in the country, built by business leaders, labor leaders, government officials, and key advocates who came together to ask a simple question: how can we help the most people in the most efficient way possible? By joining together, we've been able to cut New York's uninsured rate in half since 2013, from 10% to 5% of our population. And we were able to do that in large part because of the toolkit provided by the Affordable Care Act, which, again, is not yet repealed and which I am committed to defending. In fact, many of you in this room can play and continue to play a key role in the fight against ACA repeal and its replacement with these proposed laws that clearly would leave us worse off than we are now. Many business leaders have been outspoken in their opposition, and it's very important, particularly folks from the healthcare and insurance industries. We need these voices to be even louder in the days ahead. Your words resonate loudly in this White House, and partly that's because your words resonate loudly in swing states all across this country. So these are a few of the examples, and I could provide more, of the work of this emerging coalition of really the cutting edge of legal resistance that is new. It's a new role for state attorneys general. We're playing more of a role as a critical check on the power of excesses by the executive branch of the federal government that we have before in American history. But in the absence of congressional will to check the executive, it falls to us under our federalist system to take that role, and we are up to it. So I know that a lot of our fellow New Yorkers are scared and confused by what's happening in Washington. I'm sure all of you have friends who still can't process that this is really happening and are desperate for any wild silver bullet way out of this. There is no silver bullet way out of this. It's going to take hard work to derail these policies and to get our country back in track. But let me close by recalling that many of you have been here before when New York's social and economic fabric was threatened by other short-sighted or just plain stupid policy proposals from our federal government. I'm reminded of the extraordinarily successful effort by ABNY leaders and New York's elected officials to block some potentially devastating proposals in what became the federal tax reform plan of 1986. Bill to Me, your father's most remarkable achievement will always be how he somehow got business and property owners to prepay their real estate taxes in 1975. I have read the books and I still have no idea how he pulled that one off. But a close second was the campaign to derail what people forget, what was really an extraordinary federal tax reform juggernaut that emerged in 1985 and would have, among other things, eliminated the deduction for state and local taxes and devastated New York. There were a lot of proposals and a lot of heated rhetoric flying around in 85 and 86, but New York's business and political leaders focused on the key elements of the substantively dangerous proposals that could actually be blocked, and then executed an incredible plan that overcame opposition from key congressional chairs and the White House. So, Bill, if you can channel your father's energy from the 1986 campaign, maybe we can get Jay Kriegel to channel his own energy from that campaign. But the key then was, and the key now is, to focus on the substance and not get distracted by the bright lights and bright noises, loud noises. Not bright noises, loud noises, let me make that clear. I know this is hard because of the circus-like atmosphere that just seems to permeate Washington. I try to keep my office and my colleagues and counterparts focused on the real issues: people losing health care, crippling restrictions on travel, real damage to our environment. I try not to get sucked into the latest nonsense on Twitter, but it's hard, especially when the nonsense is about you. Look, the president has gone on Twitter rants calling me a sleazebag, a total lightweight, a crook, and gems like, quote, "It's Thursday. What brand of eyeliner is the nation's worst AG Schneiderman wearing today?" Close quote. Those tweets were sent when I was pursuing the Trump University litigation, which we settled on excellent terms for the students who had been ripped off and got Trump to pay a $1 million fine to the state of New York. I did not let the tweets distract me then, and I'm certainly not going to let them distract me now, and neither should any of you. We are New Yorkers. We stand for the principles of pluralism and openness and common sense. I truly believe that New York has a special role to play in building the next national consensus that must arise out of the current turmoil. We have better and longer experience, centuries old, in building great public-private partnerships and ensuring that problems that others can't solve can be solved. New York values of mutual respect, pluralism, and common sense are more important than ever. And as long as I'm your Attorney General, I promise to do everything I can to stand up for those values and to work with you to defend all the people I represent in the challenges we face together. Thank you.